Hi and welcome to At the Farm Gate, the brand new podcast from Livetec. I'm Jack Hughes, a biosecurity advisor here for Livetec Systems, and I'll be your host as we dig into the key issues shaping farming today. In this episode, we will be tackling biosecurity, what it really means in practice. And I'm joined by Julian Sparrey, our Group Technical Director, to explore Biosecurity365 and how a year-round approach can help safeguard your farm. So let's get started. Hi Julian, and welcome to the podcast. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at Livetec Systems and how Livetec Systems came about?
Hi Jack, and thank you. Yes, I started and set up Livetec Systems about 15 years ago, but I've been involved in contingency planning for livestock diseases for nearly 25 years, since we had foot and mouth in the UK, closely followed by big initial outbreaks of avian influenza in Europe in about 2003. There was big concern throughout the UK poultry industry about what would we do if we got the same incidents over here. So I started working with some of the poultry integrators and also on the research side, looking at methods of depopulation to say, how are we going to achieve this if it happens, if we get these diseases here? And if you remember, we'd just been through a horrific foot and mouth disease outbreak a couple of years earlier, so it was right on the top of people's minds. And interestingly, I was thinking back in those days, I actually went down to what was called the DEFRA library and checked out some information on how the government responded quite a long time before they put it all on the internet so that you could actually find it. So we started making plans, contingency planning with some of the poultry companies, and I was involved in research to develop systems to humanely cull birds on site. And then gradually over the years, we built capability to actually go out and do those depopulations. And that's where in 2010 I set up the company with Gordon Samet, and the rest is history. But we have pivoted now a lot into prevention of disease outbreaks rather than just responding to them when they occur. So our drive now is to try and prevent these outbreaks ever occurring by, as we say, improving biosecurity all year round, so keeping those pathogens out.
Thank you very much, Julian. So when we're talking about on-farm depopulations, we're talking about avian influenza, salmonellas, but also emergency response, as in fires, floods, anything what revolves in getting them birds or poultry or livestock out of them sheds as humanely as possible.
That's right. Yes, and we have responded to. We've had light aircraft crash onto sheds. We've obviously fires and flooding can be a challenge because you need to get the birds up quickly. So having an emergency response team, and we have a very good operations team behind us who are out on farm in any weather dealing with these situations, and that has really led our learning into what is causing these diseases to happen, whether it be avian influenza or salmonella, because we see the consequences. We see the devastation for the farmers. So it brings live our determination to try and prevent and just spot those issues that are common across the farms we attend, particularly with disease outbreaks.
Of course, prevention is better than cure. So in simple terms, I mean, as you say, we're pivoting as a company towards prevention and helping producers, farmers, to prevent disease getting into these areas and challenges getting in and affecting the poultry and the bottom line of the business. So in your own simple terms, how do you define biosecurity? And also, why is it so critical on farms today as the industry builds into larger units?
I mean, there's lots of dictionary definitions of biosecurity quoted about ingress and egress of pathogens and things like that. But I think in fundamental terms, it's building some practices, some practical processes that help people manage their activities on farm to prevent pathogens coming in and out of the farm. But it's not limited to just people going in and out of the farm. It's to do with maintenance, it's to do with structure, it's to do with process, and also what we work a lot on, as you know, is mindset change, is understanding why the activities you carry out might be bringing pathogens into the building and what risk they pose. And that's why we say Biosecurity 365, because it's all year round, not just through peak seasons for bird migration or whatever.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's a big passion of myself, is to get people to understand that biosecurity 365 days of the year is monetizing biosecurity. It helps them produce more, less mortality, more eggs, more poultry coming off that farm, means more eggs going to the factory or more poultry going to the factory. But unfortunately, as an industry, we have this mindset that, we start to look at biosecurity during these heightened times more, and that we should implement it or introduce higher biosecurity during these times. And as you mentioned, it's about breaking that mindset and introducing and allowing data to speak for itself that, biosecurity does pay.
Yes, definitely.
And as you mentioned, it's not just about mindset or what physically they're on farm. It is about understanding why, how, and what works for each individual site. So during your time in building, contingency plans and going out onto farms as an advisor yourself, Jules, what would you say is the most common risks or the weak points in on-farm biosecurity?
Possibly, I'd say one of the weaknesses initially of our approach to biosecurity on poultry farms was the assumption it's about strangers and visitors and lorries coming to the farm. Which had been true. I think we built our paradigms on foot and mouth, and that's probably where we went wrong at the beginning of avian influenza, is trying to, just saying, well, it's vehicles and wheels and things that are going to cause the problem. But our learning from being on over 300 outbreak sites is that it's individual behavior in going in and out of sheds that is causing the problem, because the contamination, if you like, is coming from the sky. It's high densities of wild birds that are infected with avian influenza. They're not necessarily the migrating birds, but they're birds that have picked it up in the wild, in the neighborhood. If you think about, geese moving on a daily basis between a water body at night and grazing during the day on arable land, or gulls which move 50 kilometers a day, you've persistently got additional contamination coming in. As the CVO used to say, it's a teaspoon of feces can carry enough virus to contaminate 10,000 birds. So it's those everyday little movements in and out of the shed, which is our weakest point. And I'm sure we'll come on to it, but relying on dipping your toes in foot dip is not the answer. So, as you know, Jack, we work on full procedures for going in and out of sheds. So I think that's our worst point is going in and out of sheds. But you've got to match that with good maintenance to stop it coming in through the roof. It's the humans that are going to stop it coming in through the door. It's maintenance that's going to stop it coming in through the roof or the walls or the doors or under the doors. Yeah.
And that's via water ingress or through vermin activity, I expect.
Yes, exactly. It's interesting when you look around a shed. When we do our site visits, we're always looking behind the shed to check for places where it's obvious that we've had water ingress throughout the year or at certain periods of the year. So it's not just looking at the front door. We always look at the back door as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. As an advisor myself, the main aspect I'm looking at is that movement, not only into each individual shed, but between the sheds, what we're doing as we're walking around farm. Have we got site-specific footwear? Have we also, the main thing is if we've got shed-specific footwear. We can't get vermin to put shoes on, and we can definitely not get vermin to dip the feet and disinfect. So making sure we've got the robust pest plan in place is ultimately, a major factor to what's going out onto farms as well.
Well, that's true. There's more and more data that we're seeing now on where people are measuring the effect of small birds and vermin just bringing virus in. They're not affected by it. It's just on them. It's just on their dirty feet. So yeah, keeping them out is essential.
So with all this going on out on farm, a farmer, producer, they've got a lot of areas that they need to look at constantly. I mean, their main goal is to obviously get eggs, get poultry out of the door at the most effective, and welfare-friendly way. But with all these aspects to look at on a daily basis, do you think fatigue kicks in throughout the year? How do we keep biosecurity, 365, as we've mentioned, without getting fatigued?
I think part of it is you've just got to get the system right. You've got to get it easier to comply than not comply. So, as we were saying, the best investment you can make are boots. Boots for staff, boots for visitors. But if you're going to be changing your boots, make it really easy. Have a decent sit-down barrier to sit on, not just a tiny, what people are just calling step over, because that's exactly what happens. People just step over it. It's a badly termed device. So it's spending your money on buying boots and building an easy facility to sit down, change your footwear, swing your feet over, change your overall, go into the birds. I think that is 99% of the task. If you haven't built that right, then people are going to get fed up with doing it. They're going to take the shortcuts. They're going to maybe not change their boots. They're going to go, I'm just going in quickly. It won't matter. But it's that 2-second visit that does matter, because that's where you could have just walked the contamination in. So it's about working with your staff to get that process right. How are we going to go in the sheds 4 or 5 times a day? That's the repeatable action that brings the pathogens in, or is potential to bring the pathogens in. And you just got to make that journey so easy for people that it's second nature. Even if they're carrying something, we know you'll be carrying a basket of eggs or something off the floor. You need somewhere safe to put it down while you change your boots. So it's thinking through that little process. And that's the important stuff before you spend a fortune on overhead gantries and goodness knows what outside on risks that are really minimal. For avian influenza, I'm not saying that you can't bring salmonellas and things in like that, but potentially for external pathogens. We'd work on that.
I suppose that's having the conversations. This is something I see weekly when I do go out onto farms. It's having them conversations with the staff that are on the ground. What footwear works for you, what footwear is easy for you to be taking on and off, what's comfy for you to be wearing daily. What we normally see is there's a pair of wellies and that's what you need to wear. But ultimately, if the worker on the farm is not comfy in them, or they don't fit correctly, or they're a bit loose, they're probably not going to wear them effectively. They're not going to put them on as they should do. So I think it's a major thing for me and for us at Livetec is to have these conversations with the clients and our customers to understand what's actually happening on the ground, not just what's the cheapest option or the easiest option. Because ultimately, if the staff are not complying, it only takes that once. Disease and challenges don't need an invite; they just need an opportunity.
Exactly, and if you don't give people the right footwear, right? If you're working just in the egg room, running around in a pair of Crocs is probably fine. But clambering around inside the shed, you definitely need the right footwear. And provided that footwear doesn't leave the shed area and it's behind its barrier, then it could be of any sort that's easy to get on, comfortable to wear, and suits the job. Because it just stays there. It doesn't have to do anything else. So I agree with you. It's working with staff to understand what their needs are, and so they just make it happen then. Because we can't, as you say, biosecurity fatigue, we can't be at peak performance all year round, because it's just too stressful. So it's looking at when the risk is highest, putting in those extra steps potentially then. But the all year round part has to be easy, has to be second nature.
Yeah, exactly. And it also needs to be inexpensive. A lot of this can be inexpensive. We see sites that are putting all singing, all dancing wheel sprayers and disinfecting sprayers at the front of the farm, yet people are driving round them. It's human nature to find the easiest way around infrastructure and how do we not get disinfectant all over our brake pads and break discs, and if there is a route round and we're not fenced in, people will make the way around it. Where ultimately our approach here at Livetec is to not bring people on anyway. If we can have vehicles outside of that farm, apart from your needed vehicles, delivery vehicles and feed wagons, why is anybody else driving onto these sites?
Well, it's breaking that down into, like we do, into zones, and say you can only control certain things. And the smaller area you're trying to control, the more successful you'll be. So we know the shed where the birds are held can be controlled because it's got walls around it and doors in, and we can do a certain amount of that. When you step out of that to the curtilage of the farm, the spaces between the sheds, you really should only have farm staff in there, and a feed lorry at worst. Nobody else should be coming clear to that. And then you could lock that area off. So all the people delivering anything else, you shouldn't need huge wheel washers, vehicle washers, because everybody else's vehicles should be well away from the sheds, not causing additional contamination. But I think this is where people have got things slightly wrong, in that they'll put a control in. It could be half a mile from the farm. It could be at the farm gate. We don't need it that far away. When we talk to people, we say start really getting that lockdown control within 10 or 20 meters of the sheds, where the sheds are, not up a dirty track several hundred meters away, because you'll be recontaminated by the time you get back. And I think that message is getting out there. I know you go to more farms than I do now, Jack, but you can see that understanding happening of concreting close into the sheds, having an area you can keep absolutely clean. And again, where that feed vehicle comes in, or the egg collection lorry comes in, have a good bit of hard standing that you can wash off. Clean up after it leaves, so that you're not walking that contamination back into the shed.
Totally agree there, Julian. It's about making the area smaller and more manageable. If the area you're working in is that little bit smaller, and the less people that are coming in, the more the risk is reduced and the more manageable it becomes. So just in respect to what we've just been talking about, what would be the immediate or the most practical steps you would recommend to farmers wanting to improve the biosecurity? How can we help today by giving just a quick point on where we would start?
It's probably back over what we were just talking about. I'd spend money on boots ahead of big infrastructure projects. So boots first, then concrete for me. If you can concrete around the curtilage of the building so that anything close into the building can be cleaned up, not just, we know for line and red tractor we put concrete down underneath silos just so you can keep the area around the silos clean. But I would extend that straight away to where the lorry is standing. A good 15, 16 meters of concrete that the lorry can stand on, making sure that the ground is good. Keeping the weeds down and things like that. Doing maintenance in the summer. We always talk about, as you said just before, Jack. People think about biosecurity when it's a bit late in October, November, and you can't really get out there and doing anything about it. So, in this good weather, I say we're recording this in the summer, I should say. This is the time you need to be out there making those preparations for the winter.
I would like to say, bear in mind, you are in the south of England, Julian, and I'm in the north of England, where summer does not come round very often. But yeah, I mean, it's right. The immediate things we need to be looking at, and I think the industry as a whole needs to look at. We and I hear it very often as well. If we do go down with avian influenza, everything's going to be cold. That's right, that's correct. Everything is going to be cold, but do we want to move things from shed to shed to shed? Because if we have that mentality that everything's going to be cold, then why would people put in place strict biosecurity between sheds? Because their initial thought process is just, well, everything's going to go anyway.
Well, it's that ability to lock down. As soon as you get that sign of mortality, and your obligation is to call it into DEFRA and report it. Vet will be out within an hour and a half, supposedly, from DEFRA, government vet. And part of what they do is look at how many birds are affected. Now, if you've just got one shed affected, you've the potential to get compensated for the rest of the site. If that disease has already spread and affected other sheds, then in financial terms, you'll just get less compensation. So controlling that biosecurity between sheds in terms of a notifiable disease is crucially important to stop that spread to other sheds. But equally, anything you do to prevent the spread of something like avian influenza is going to have a knock-on effect for other diseases that affect poultry. We've already talked about, getting peak performance out of your birds. If you're allowing pathogens to transfer from shed to shed, you're going to lower the ability of them to produce eggs, to put on meat. So it does have a financial benefit. Biosecurity, it's very difficult to prove that biosecurity has a financial benefit, but in terms of health and well-being, it does have a benefit. And if those birds are healthier and less challenged by pathogens, they will produce more. So anything you can do for that inter-shed biosecurity, and we have seen even in highly biosecure units that are linked together, if you allow contamination to spread between those even internally linked areas, you can have devastating consequence. So it's even if you've got internally linked areas within a building, you have to make sure you separate those live bird areas to prevent that contamination spreading throughout the unit.
Yeah, again, the virus and challenges, they don't need to be invited, do they? And I think as we move, away from the broiler industry, not really been there for many a year, but in the laying sector of the industry, specifically here in the UK, and probably what we're seeing happening over in America gradually as well, and Europe, is we are moving away from the cage systems. We're moving into free range systems. We're moving into barn systems. It's a change in mindset from working in a cage system where you really have not much contact with the bird. You're not bringing shavings in, littering, walking amongst the birds physically. As these units are now moving into barn units, I see that as a real challenge, specifically here, in the UK and probably over in the States as well, because people are not used to that walking amongst the birds. We are really there with the free range sector because they've grown with that. But as barn, cage, landlocked units are fluctuating into the barn sector, we're just heightening that risk.
Yes, and it is going to be really important where people are transitioning from cage to barn to build in probably more biosecurity than they did before, particularly where you're converting a 10-tier colony unit to double-decker barn, to make sure you've got biosecurity between the upper and lower floors. And it is, as we said, it's just stopping that chances of pathogens translocating from one group to another, and keep that performance up.
So with all that combined, I know what Livetec does to support farmers on this journey of becoming more biosecure and being ready, hopefully for something what never happens, but we're always better being prepared than ill-prepared. So from your point of view, what can Livetec do, and how does Livetec support farmers on this journey?
Well, we've always got a very one-to-one approach to farmers. We've put one advisor in front of one farmer, and worked with them to prepare. Well, initially it was preparing contingency plans, and within that contingency plan, we started writing escalating biosecurity plans. So, okay, what do we need to do beyond your normal day-to-day? What do we need to do if you're aware that disease is in the country, if you're aware that you're close to a zone, if you're in a zone? Once you get into a disease control zone, there are statutory things you have to put in place in order to get a license to move birds, or just to protect yourself from the disease, which could be within 10 kilometers of your farm. So we were doing that on a very one-to-one basis, which becomes quite inefficient when you're trying to get to around several thousand farms in the country. So we went on a journey a couple of years ago now to see how could we deliver our effective contingency planning and biosecurity advisory services in a more efficient way. So we started moving over onto digital platforms, and Jack has fully been at the center of developing what we're calling the EBAS. So we would help people with a biosecurity assessment and risk assessment face to face. How on earth would you build this into a digital tool? So Jack and his colleagues have been working for a number of years now on defining a set of questions that will lead you through the process to define the risk within your business in terms of biosecurity. And it gives you a score at the end of the day of what, from our appreciation of biosecurity, from our experience of disease outbreaks, what are those real things that are going to affect the ability of a pathogen to get into your site? The actual practices, not the estimated theoretical practices, but the actual practices that we see that are common to a lot of farms. So that's what has been built in that question set within the electronic biosecurity assessment system, and it gives you a risk rating for your farm split down into areas. And I think that is where we're leading, so that more people can access these services remotely. It doesn't mean to say you can't then come and get some one-to-one advice. And in fact, you could probably tell me more about how that electronic scoring system can then provide you with some key pointers about how to improve your score.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the EBAS itself was a challenge to bring all of our brains and industry knowledge from on-farm industry knowledge, not just we brought the scientific side into it as well, but the actual practicalities of what happens and works on poultry farms on a daily basis. And so to build a system, what we go out and do as individuals as we're walking around the farm, we started off with 200-300 questions. Well, you can never ask a producer or a farmer to sit there and answer 300 questions. But ultimately, as you're walking around the farm in person, they will answer these questions just quick fire because you're bringing them into a conversation. So it did take some time. It took a lot of iterations to get down to what we've got now, which is ultimately, a fantastic tool. And as you mentioned, Jules, is to build in and bring out a score for each individual area of the farm. And the way the system's been built is to take you on that journey from your rest of farm area up into the live birds. And we score each individual area. And ultimately, we're never going to be 100% in every area. It's just inevitable. It can never happen. We've got farms with arable or other livestock going on outside of them farms. But ultimately, what we want to do is get to that live bird area and be up there at near enough 100%. 100% would be fantastic. Are we ever going to get to 100%? No. But what we want to do is give a biosecurity score, but actually flip that on its head to give a risk factor, a risk score, and that ultimately plays to the mindset changes. We can be 88% biosecure, but you're actually 12% at risk. And you're probably going to act on the 12% at risk. And it's ultimately that what we want to nail with producers and growers. But on every area, every question, every answer, we will be producing a recommendation or a reasoning behind why we could improve them areas, or we could improve them, that specific question what you've answered, which ultimately will build a report at the end of the survey. And that's what we want to call it. We want to call it a survey. It's not an audit. We're not coming out to audit you or tell you this is how it needs to be, because not every farm is the same. We're not an assurance scheme. We're not coming in and saying you need to stick by this. We're coming in to help and to look at each individual farm. And I think as an industry, That's where we're at the forefront, because we are looking at each individual farm in its own working manner, because what works on one farm may well not work on another, and that's what we're trying to identify, is how these systems can help. We are a biosecure company, as we mentioned, and we can't be going out to 5 farms a week. That's just not what we do. And if we was to be going to 2 farms a week, we would need a big team, a huge team, but to be able to do it remotely and to give that one-on-one advice as well when we see these scores coming in is paying dividends to the companies that we're working with.
Yeah, and I like the idea of turning this on its head to saying you're not 80% secure, you're 20% vulnerable, and looking at where those vulnerabilities lie within the farm. So as we divide up the farm in different areas, if your vulnerability is wetland areas around the farm, or nice arable grazing land around the farm, or just something about the way your farm is structured, then the other side of what we're working on is what is going to trigger those vulnerabilities. What is it? Approaching migration patterns? Is it weather patterns that's going to affect it? So if we know you're vulnerable to pooling water on your farm because you've got uneven ground that is just planings or whatever, and we know there's weather coming in that's going to create puddles, then that's your vulnerability, and that's when you need to up that those biosecurity practices. Whereas if your vulnerability is a lake adjacent to your property, then your massive risk factor will be incoming migration, and we can track migration patterns so closely now. You can take action. It's having a vulnerability that you can then take action on. And some of them may be structural. Some may be that summer work that we say we need to get onto. That you've got a leaky brickwork or something, or doors that aren't shutting properly. That's structural that you can plan for. If your vulnerability is something else that's seasonal, then you can look at that. But it takes the issue down from a huge elephant-sized problem to a smaller vulnerability, and I think that's where we need to take people, because that's a much better place to be in, to say, okay, I've got a 10% vulnerability. I can focus on that now, rather than just go, yeah, I'm 80%, 90% secure, I'm absolutely fine. Because we have seen, and that all the data we get back from farm from all these outbreaks, it's just that 1 or 2% of issues that are causing that virus to come in. As we said, the teaspoon of virus, the 5 grams of virus of feces is going to affect you. So where's that getting in? And the EBAS will tell you, and turning it around into that vulnerability index is a great way of looking at it.
And again, as you mentioned, having the understanding of what's going on in the area, and I think the app that Livetec have built, the free app we will say at the moment, and downloadable, the ability during the season and year round to map and to pin your own farm, but then to also get notifications of zones and avian influenza zones occurring around your farm, or whether you're in the farm when you come out of a zone, when you're in a zone. And one thing, what really shows to me and will pave our way in the future is the ability to see them wild bird deaths and the wild bird migrations, which gives a head start to our users and people who have downloaded the app to understand what's actually going on in the area.
Yes, it is. And as we get more people on the system, and more data onto the system, it becomes even more useful to everybody to see those risks arriving almost in real time. And that's a big goal of Livetec, is to get into that prediction space where we can say to you, in the next 3 weeks you could be in big trouble. So now's the time to actually ramp up that biosecurity. At the moment, we get generalities about prevention zones across the whole country or whole county. Having housing orders seem to be coming in fits and starts. But if we can target advice to your farm based on your biosecurity score, based on your vulnerabilities, using data that's coming in from meteorological data, migration data, and all the years of previous outbreaks we've got embedded into the system now. I mean, we've got data going back almost 20 years that is embedded into the system, and then building those algorithms to predict. That's a real strength of where we can be, and we need to get people into the system so we can just build that data set. The power of data is fantastic.
And this will be used to, help the industry as a whole. And the more we move into other livestock sectors as well, we'll be able to start to look at them. So we do realise, digital systems can really make a difference in day-to-day farming operations. It's just getting the farmers, the producers, the growers to understand that the power of data will actually help predict, prevent, and keep them safe. So as we move more and more into the digital world, and we've now got our emergency response plans available in a digital format, which means we're not having it's a self-service as well, so they can do this themselves. From your point of view, how important is it to have an emergency response plan on farm?
I think it's vital because if you suspect a notifiable disease, you've got to, as we said before, you've got to tell the government that it's there, and then things can feel out of control at that point if you don't know what's going on, and by having that emergency response plan in place, it will lead you through the process that APHA are going through with you. It'll have information to hand that you will be asked. So there's the veterinary investigation is a whole series of questions which and a 40-page document to fill in with a vet who will come and sit at your kitchen table and go through it, and they will go through it and through it and through it until they've got all the answers. Now, unless you've got all that information in one place, that process can take a day. If you've got it in one place, that process takes half an hour. And once you've done that half hour, you can go and start looking after the birds. But because the paperwork has to be done before the birds are even inspected, if you haven't got everything in order, if you don't know what's expected of you, then it's a very stressful time. It's a very stressful time. So the emergency response plan is designed to have all that data at your fingertips. And it's something that you can fill in, in the evenings over a period of time. It's not something that you have to do all in one go. So it's built there to gather information into one place, so that you can respond to the veterinary inspector when they arrive. And it just gives that peace of mind that you've done everything you can to respond to an outbreak.
Yeah, and we know from customers we've worked closely with, unfortunately, have gone through the experience of having an outbreak. Having that emergency response plan has been pivotal into how that operation ran from the moment of finding out or believing they had avian influenza to the moment of the culling. And I think for the industry, no one really knows what's going to happen until that day comes. And for us, it's to be prepared for when that day comes, or ultimately should never come, and we hope never happens. But again, we would rather people be prepared than ill prepared and have to go through that such a stressful time.
Yes, and it has paid its dividends for a couple of people that have had to use them in anger, and just getting through that process safely and quickly.
Yeah, again, people see the birds leaving at when the broilers go into the slaughter or the layers finishing their end of lay period, and we kind of switch off to that fact that the catchers come in at night time or in the morning, they catch the birds and on the lorry and they're gone. And it's we have this mindset and this way of being able to switch off that animal has gone and left the farm. It's no longer our problem, and then we get cracking with a clean down and wash down in a normal turnaround. But I think for anybody who's seen people go through it, or as we've seen actually being there on site when an outbreak actually happens, and then birds are being taken away from you at a time when you wasn't ready for them to go, or they're still in peak production, or they're still producing for you. I think that time really opens people's eyes to what. And I know people who've just never gone back into production. they'll never put birds back in the farm again because it's such a stressful time.
Exactly, and by being prepared, whether it's a full contingency plan, an emergency response plan, improved biosecurity, it gives you that peace of mind. It improves the mental health of going through that process because you've thought about it in advance. You've sat through the process of what might happen, and so when it does happen, you're much more ready for it. I think we've seen some very distressing cases from the operational side of the business, where people just didn't have a clue what was going to happen, and they are understandably, everyone's devastated by what's happening. And as you see, if you see those birds being depopulated in front of you, it is so different to being caught and transported away for that to happen somewhere else. Yeah. 50% of the work we do, it seems to be support for farmers just to get through that process. And this is what we see. Our digital platform we see as a massive contribution towards that, just planning ahead and thinking through.
That's brilliant. So just to wrap this up, really, I'd suggest now, Jules, is where can farmers find more resources or start working with Livetec if they're interested in our support, or they're interested in working alongside us in how we can bring more data and influence to what we're trying to achieve here at Livetec?
Well, yes, I mean, the quickest and easiest thing people can do is download the app. It's absolutely free. It's on your whatever favorite app platform you want to go to. Livetec Protect, Livestock Protect from Livetec. And just pop your farm on there and you will start receiving notifications if you're if you go in or out of a zone. But the other useful, right in the middle at the front there's a button with a big P on it. It's our curated AI tool, which has been taught on, if you like, the Livetec biosecurity principles. It's not trawling the entire world. It's trawling Livetec knowledge, some government knowledge, some assurance scheme knowledge about what biosecurity works, what is required, and therefore, if you want a quick answer to something, download the app, use that button. It's giving you really good advice in there. If you don't get the answer you need, then phone Livetec, and we can start developing more ideas for you. But in the first instance, go to the app. And then if you want to go that one step higher, then we've got the EBAS, we've got the ERP, which are more premium features within there. But start with the app. There's free advice in there. Use the good side of AI, because it is genuinely taught on just sort of Livetec information, a small group of information that is curated, and you get good answers out of it.
Oh, that's fantastic, and I'd like to thank you for today, Jules, and joining us here on at the farm gate. And I'd like to thank everybody for listening to At the Farm Gate. If you found the episode helpful, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. We've got plenty more expert insights coming your way to help protect and future-proof your farm. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jack. See you soon.